23rd of June 2016, a fateful day in British politics. A simple question was put to the people: remain or leave? But what unfolded was nothing but simple. It divided families, sent shockwaves both through Parliament and across the globe. Let's unravel the story of Brexit, where it began, what it meant, and why its echoes are still felt today. But before we continue, if you like this content, remember to like and subscribe. It's completely free and helps me make more videos like these for you guys. Thanks. Let's get back to the video. So, the seeds of Brexit had been sown long before 2016, even from the moment Britain joined the EU, then the EEC, in 1973. In 1988, Thatcher made the famous Bruges speech, speaking about fears of a European superstate being created with its authority centred in Brussels. The debate intensified as the EU evolved from an economic partnership into a political union in 1993 after the Maastricht Treaty was ratified. It had a large Eurosceptic response. For some, this treaty was progress, for others, it was overreach. By the 2010s, Euroscepticism had become mainstream, especially with the prominent rise of UKIP, led by this man. In 2014, they finished first in the European elections with 27.5% of the vote. UKIP put relentless pressure upon the Conservative government at the time, led by David Cameron, to the point where Cameron promised referendum if he was re-elected. The campaign caused political divide throughout Parliament. The party who supported Remain versus UKIP, the single party who supported Leave. The Conservatives remained neutral in this campaign, but allowed its MPs to choose a side that they wanted along with the Labour Party. The Remain campaign, led by David Cameron, argued the EU brought economic prosperity and greater security. However, the Leave campaign, led by Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, argued that we need to take back our borders and give $350 million for our NHS. On the 22nd of February 2016, Cameron announced that the referendum would be held on 23rd of June 2016, and that, in the case of a Leave victory, they would trigger Article 50, which allowed a 2-year period to negotiate a settlement to exit the EU. Referendum night. Throughout the night, a YouGov poll showed a very close race, with Remain slightly ahead, with 52% versus 48% supporting to leave. However, the result came out at 7:20 AM that the country had voted to leave the EU, with 51.9% of the vote and Remain getting 48.1%. And so, Cameron resigned on 24th of June 2016, and the Conservative Party made a very smart decision of replacing him with someone who voted Remain in the EU referendum, Theresa May, on the 13th of July 2016. Article 50, once it had been signed on the 29th of March, gave Britain 2 years to leave the EU, and so they should leave the EU on the 29th of March 2019. So I'm just going to pause the video here. As you know, they did not leave on the 29th of March 2019. They did not end up leaving until about a year later. In April 2017, the EU set out its key priorities, focusing on citizen rights, the Irish border, and the financial settlement, and warned that no trade negotiations could take place until those key issues had been sorted out. Furthermore, in April 2017, Theresa May called a snap election to take place on the 8th of June 2017 to strengthen her hand in the negotiations, where the manifesto, along with Labour and UKIP, promised to implement the referendum. However, the Lib Dems and the Green Party promised to have a second referendum. The result? A hung parliament, with the Conservatives still the largest political party. Now, you remember when I said this? The EU set out its key priorities, focusing on citizen rights, the Irish border, and the financial settlement. Well, the Irish border was a very thorny issue. Under the Good Friday Agreement, the UK and Ireland had an open border. However, Brexit threatened to close that border, and so the EU promised a backstop, which was basically a plan to keep Northern Ireland aligned with EU rules in case a no deal reached a Brexit. But this idea was contested by many Brexiteers, saying that it was a trap. Furthermore, the financial settlement, also known as the divorce bill, required Britain to pay £39 billion for obligations such as EU pensions, which, as you can imagine, was extremely unpopular among the hardline Brexiteers. Finally, in terms of trade, Britain wanted to leave the single market and custom union, but still have a frictionless trade deal. However, The EU said to that, absolutely not. There's no way you're doing that. By November 2018, Theresa May and the EU reached a draft deal which included the backstop, the financial settlement, and the plans for a transition period. So, in 2019 January, Theresa May went to Parliament thinking that she had solved Brexit. But the deal was rejected 3 times, including the largest defeat for a sitting government in modern UK history. And so, on March 20th, obliged to do so by Parliament, May asked the EU to delay Brexit from March 29th to June 30th. The next day, the EU leaders offered the UK 2 alternative extensions: May 22nd if the deal was passed, April 12th if the deal was not. On April 10th, after May requested another Brexit deal, the EU leaders at a special summit approved a flexible extension of the UK's membership until October 31st. On May 23rd, 2018, the UK took part in elections for the European Parliament, which the Brexit Party won. The next day, Theresa May realised defeat and said that she would step down as Conservative leader on June 7th, which she did. And this paved the way for the former Foreign Secretary and hardline Brexiteer Boris Johnson. On August 19th, Johnson issued a formal plea to the EU to ditch the Irish backstop from the withdrawal agreement. The EU refused, but still Boris Johnson implored the British people that the country would leave the EU on October 31st, 2019, after running with the UK Supreme Court and the signing of a bill without Parliament's consent. On October 3rd, the UK government sent a new Brexit plan to Brussels, including the removal of the backstop. It was widely greeted with scepticism and was rejected by the European Commission 3 days later. However, to everyone's surprise, on October 17th, 2018, the UK and the EU announced dramatically that they'd somehow struck a new Brexit deal ahead of a Brussels summit, which replaced the Irish backstop. But on October 19th, the British MPs withheld their approval for the deal until laws that could implement Brexit were in place, which caused Johnson to yet again ask for another Brexit delay until January 31st, 2020. But in December 2019, election season came round, with the Conservatives using the slogan, "Get Brexit Done," and they won an 80-seat majority. And so, on January 23rd, 2020, the UK's EU withdrawal bill became law, after relatively smooth passage through Parliament compared to the earlier havoc. On January 29th, 2020, the European Parliament approved the Brexit divorce deal, and on January 31st, the UK officially left the EU at midnight. Right, so that was a very long and confusing process, but this is essentially what happens if you vote in Romania to try and leave the EU. You take ages, and surprisingly, a Brexiteer in Boris Johnson got Brexit done relatively quickly. Come on, Tories, you're better than this. Well, I guess not, you're not. I guess expecting smooth sailing from the party that brought us a big society and Liz Truss's record-breaking premiership might be asking too much. But, jokes aside, the consequence of this messy process is no laughing matter. Worker shortages, trade barriers, and Northern Ireland's ongoing drama are just the beginning. So, one question to leave you with: do you think Brexit has been an utter failure, or do you think the successes will come in due time as the economy starts to pick up after the pandemic? Let me know what you think in the comments. Who's to blame for this Brexit circus? The EU, the UK government, or maybe the voters? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.